This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Giduyuat. It's Tuesday, September 17th. This is Africa 54. Could malaria be wiped out in a generation? Some experts say yes. From the United States to Ghana, a taste of home in the homeland. And in a new report, Gates Foundation co-founder Bill Gates praises worldwide gains in education and health, but sounds the alarm on inequality. We begin this evening with an update in the fight to eradicate malaria. A new report says the mosquito-borne disease caused by a parasite could be wiped out in a generation if $2 billion more each year would be invested in battling the disease. However, there is an ongoing debate over whether the global community should make eradication its primary goal. Henry Ridgwell reports from London.
Malaria kills around 435,000 people every year, most of them children. Significant progress has been made this century in fighting the disease, with the number of deaths dropping by half since 2000. The new report, published in the Lancet Medical Journal and written by 41 of the world's leading malaria experts, says the disease could be wiped out within a generation, but it won't be easy.
So, you might think that actually right now that's the trajectory. The challenge is in the last couple of years, things have stagnated.
Just 5 African countries account for half of the global malaria burden. Burundi is in the grip of a malaria outbreak. Doctors say there's an urgent need for investment in healthcare.
Everyone should know that malaria is a disease of the poor. And then, as I said, in terms of national health policy, malaria remains the leading cause of death.
The report authors estimate that $4.3 billion is spent globally on fighting malaria each year. But it says another $2 billion will be needed annually to wipe out the disease by 2050. It will also require new tools, which might include so-called gene drives that could make mosquito populations collapse or render them resistant to the malaria parasite.
We need every piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So to say that just controlling vector would be the magic bullet, or just coming up with a new drug would be the magic bullet, I think most would agree that's naive. I think we need the new frontier of tools that maybe don't even exist yet.
A malaria eradication program was attempted in the 1950s, but abandoned a decade later. New focus and investment in recent decades, particularly from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, has given renewed impetus. But there are some concerns.
The last thing we want is to start saying we're marching towards eradication, but then you get that donor fatigue and stakeholder fatigue of we're just not getting there, we're just not making progress, this is failing.
The United Nations says better overall healthcare is critical.
Without adequate healthcare, people-centered, properly financed systems, we will not achieve eradication.
The Lancet report authors say malaria eradication will require huge ambition and commitment, but the social rewards will be worth the investment. Henry Ridgwell for VOA News, London.
The world has seen significant advances toward eliminating malaria infection and death over the past decade. In some regions, however, progress has slowed, according to the World Health Organization. Sheila Pony reports from South Sudan, where due to years of conflict and environmental conditions, malaria may be finding a new foothold.
In South Sudan, malaria is the leading cause of sickness and death in children under 5 years old.
This year, so far, we have seen that a number of counties have reported an increase above the normal of what they used to report in the past years. So from our weekly reports, 25 counties have been identified to report increase in malaria cases compared to the previous years.
As South Sudan enters the high point of this year's rainy season, this is a scene that mothers such as Faida Shamima and her 9-month-old girl are living through but struggle to understand.
I brought her to the hospital. Her body was weak. She was vomiting and having diarrhea, and I was told she has malaria. I really don't know what to do about this malaria. Even after treatment, it keeps coming back.
The patient overload also overwhelms medical workers.
Annually, we see about 4 million cases reported from the health facility mainly.
At Al-Shaba Hospital for Children in Juba, 7 of every 10 cases are malaria related.
We have like 12 to 14 medical doctors in the hospital. And I think we're now receiving 3 times more than our capacities. So we need more doctors, we need more human resource.
This year, heavy rain and poor infrastructure, filled swamps, flooded streets and overflowed canals, creating ideal breathing conditions for mosquitoes. As part of the South Sudan Malaria Control Group, MedAir provides medicine, treatment and mosquito nets to many rural parts of the country where malaria is on the rise.
So in our clinics, which we operate in Awil, Rank and Lair, we are noticing an increase of cases in all of those locations, particularly in Awil County. For instance, we had 797 cases reported in August of 2018. This year, August 2019, we had 1,300 cases. So it has increased this year over last year.
However, experts remain positive. They say with enough resources, commitment and political will, malaria-related illness and death can be reduced in South Sudan and perhaps even eliminated. Sheila Boni for VOA News, Juba, South Sudan.
The forced recruitment of child soldiers is increasing in South Sudan despite a peace deal reached last year, according to the head of a United Nations Commission on Human Rights. Speaking to Reuters in Geneva on Monday, Yasmin Suka said investigators have recently observed a reversal as both government and rebel groups seek to increase their numbers. Some recruits are girls who are being exposed to sexual exploitation by fighters. Some of the thousands of child soldiers were released until after the 2018 accord. Now, another sea tragedy has occurred off the coast of North Africa. A boat carrying migrants sank off the coast of Tunisia Tuesday, drowning at least 2 people, with 9 rescued and another 14 missing, according to a Coast Guard official. Hossein Jebali told reporters that the boat sank 10 kilometers from the city of Sfax. Jebali says all of the migrants aboard the vessel were Tunisians. In North Africa, 2 political outsiders, law professor Kais Said and detained media mogul Nabil Karoui, shocked Tunisia's political establishment by winning the most votes in Sunday's first-round presidential vote. The Independent Electoral Commission says the 2 candidates are now set for a runoff election. The Electoral Commission says Said won 18% of the votes, while Karoui garnered 15%. Abdel Fattah Mourou of the moderate Islamist Ennahda party came in third in a crowded field of 26 candidates with 13% of the votes. Prime Minister Youssef Chahid, whose popularity has been tarnished by a sluggish economy, finished in 5th place with only 7% of the poll, trailing former Defense Minister Abdel Karim Zebidi. A date for the second-round runoff election has not yet been set. The winning candidate will be appointed to a 5-year term. A Senegalese drone enthusiast has been working with drones both in the photography and health sectors for years. But recently, Mamadou Wade Diop decided to work with local blacksmiths to build a drone made entirely in Senegal. VOA's Isha Sarai has more from the Senegalese city of Mbour.
Mamadou Wade Diop, who calls himself Dr. Drone on social media, is one of the few people, if not the only person, in the Dakar area who can fix broken drones. But recently, he's taken his knowledge a step further, consulting with drone makers across the world via the internet on how to construct one of his own.
For example, I've spoken with Chinese and French people about their experiences designing and creating drones.
While Wad does a lot of work in the audiovisual sector, renting his services out to news and documentary crews, the purpose of his first made-in-Senegal drone will be the health sector. It will spread chemicals to prevent mosquito breeding in stagnant water.
This is the prototype of my made-in-Senegal drone, so it's a quadricopter. We haven't finished putting it together yet, so it has 4 helices and it can carry 15 kilograms, which means it can hold a reservoir of 10 liters. This drone will be used in the health sector, pulverizing mosquito breeding areas in the preventative fight against malaria.
Though not all materials necessary to make the drone are available in Senegal, Job says he wants to prove that it's possible to build one in his home country.
We can't find this carbon fiber in Senegal, so I ordered it from China, but we formed the pieces here with the help of local blacksmiths who have helped me make what I want. This piece we took from a broken refrigerator.
While the demand for drones is not high in Senegal, it is growing.
There is a demand, but there's not yet enough drones or knowledge about the subject here. There is Wade, there are a few others. So the demand is here, but there's not yet enough material to meet it.
If we don't start developing this technology here and now, others will come in and sell it for us for much higher prices. So we're uniquely positioned right now in Senegal and the wider region to conceive these drones.
And Wad is confident that he can fulfill his country's demands for drones as it continues to develop. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Mbour, Senegal.
African Americans are being encouraged to visit Ghana to mark 400 years since the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. Ghana has dubbed 2019 the Year of Return. A renowned chef is awaiting U.S. visitors to offer a taste of home in the homeland. Here's Stacey Knott in Accra.
At her roadside cafe in Accra, Chef Sage cooks up food influenced by her time in America, the Caribbean, and Ghana.
You know, I had that Southern influence, my grandmother with cornbread and macaroni and cheese, and, you know, the whole soul food works. And then also being in the Caribbean, having that Caribbean influence as well. And I don't know if a lot of people residing in Africa know that the foods in the Caribbean are so similar. You know, I mean, you have direct descendants coming from Africa to the Caribbean.
Chef Sage says she's seeing more African-American customers who are in Ghana for Year of Return activities. The American visitors are coming to mark 400 years since the start of the transatlantic slave trade. They sit alongside regular customers as Chef Sage and her family serve up plant-based fusion meals. Chef Sage was born in Brooklyn, New York, moved to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands as a child, and in 2005 moved to Ghana.
I think when African Americans relocate to Ghana, you know, we do consider this our homeland. We are happy to be here, but that food, you know, the food, you're still looking for what you're accustomed to, you know, and so I think I attract the African American crowd because I still have those flavors infused within the food.
Customers say the food is about good taste and community over dishes like sweet potato pie, spicy lentil burgers, and a bean salad.
There's something that brings us together as one people, and we can all relate to this food.
Food entrepreneur Essie Bartels is combining spices and sauces from around the world, especially Africa.
Just being able to see where all these hot spots of flavors are and bringing it together, that's what I'm trying to do with Essie Spice, and that's what I hope the Year of Return will inspire people to see how connected even food is around the world.
Bartels and Chef Sage say the Year of Return is a good time to reflect on shared history and heritage. Stacey Knott for VOA News, Accra.
You're watching Africa 54. We'll be right back.
am Sheikh Asali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The lyrics could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. Activist and tree grower Siabulela Sokomani was among 20 friends running in the Cape Town Marathon with saplings on their backs in a bid to raise awareness about climate change. The group is promoting the planting of native trees amid a nationwide push to replace invasive species with indigenous to cope with drought and climate change. Last year, Cape Town suffered its worst drought in a century. From 2001 to 2018, South Africa lost 1.3 million hectares of tree cover, equivalent to a 22% decrease since 2000, according to Global Forest Watch. Next up, it's guilt-free drinking inside this pop-up pub in London's Trenty Shoreditch neighborhood. That's because customers here can consume all they like, safe in the knowledge their purchasing is helping others. The Green Vic pop-up pub aims to be the most ethical pub in the world. That means everything it sells to its customers and everything it spends money on as a business has a positive social or environmental impact. The business also prides itself on hiring at least 25% of its staff from vulnerable or disadvantaged backgrounds, including people who have experienced homelessness, have criminal records, or who are living with a disability. And finally, the hydrofoil flying water taxi Sea Bubbles test with passengers has been approved by the authorities of Paris. Through September 20th, Sea Bubbles will be taking passengers on a scenic route on the Seine past many Paris landmarks, including Notre Dame and the Eiffel Tower. The taxi's run times are strictly set to avoid distracting other boaters during the busiest times. The maximum speed for the trials is 30 kilometers per hour. And that's what's trending today.
China is dispatching a government official to the United States this week to lay the groundwork for the resumption of high-level trade talks next month. State-run Xinhua news agency says Deputy Finance Minister Liao Min is expected to arrive in Washington Wednesday for talks with counterparts from the Trump administration to pave the way for the senior-level negotiations, which will take place at the U.S. Capitol. President Trump announced last week that he was postponing a new round of tariffs on $250 billion in Chinese goods from October 1st to October 15th as a gesture of goodwill. China followed up by lifting tariffs on U.S. soybeans, pork, and some other farm goods. U.S. President Donald Trump says that it's looking like Iran was behind the weekend attacks on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. But the president says the U.S. is not looking after retaliatory options until there is definitive proof that Tehran was responsible. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has the latest.
A series of drone attacks in Saudi Arabia, striking the heart of its oil production over the weekend, continues to raise tensions. On Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump came close to placing outright blame on Tehran. He spoke at the White House after meeting with Crown Prince Salman of Bahrain.
As soon as we find out definitively, we'll let you know, but it does look that way.
Trump insisted he does not want war with Iran, but said the U.S. is ready militarily.
That was a very large attack, And it could be met with an attack many, many times larger very easily by our country. But we're going to find out who definitively did it first.
The Iran-aligned Houthi group that controls Yemen's capital claimed responsibility. The U.S. has not offered any evidence proving Iran was behind the attack. Tehran denies any involvement, calling the accusations maximum lies.
Yemeni people are exercising their legitimate right of defense. The attacks are reciprocal, and the main solution is to halt these attacks. The solution for the Yemeni crisis is also political.
The special envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen told the UN Security Council that the attack has far-reaching consequences.
This extremely serious incident makes the chances of a regional conflict that much higher and of a rapprochement that much lower.
Despite the attacks, Trump said there is still a path to diplomacy. Fears of widening hostilities in the region have sent oil prices soaring. Saudi Arabia said it will invite UN and international experts to investigate. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News at the White House.
The international media is calling camps housing families of Islamic State fighters incubators for an ISIS resurgence. But aid organizations say that despite the exposure to violence and extremism, children in these camps can be rescued, rehabilitated and reintegrated into the outside world. VOA's Heather Murdoch reports from the Al-Hol and Ain Issa camps in Syria.
At the Ain Issa camp in Syria, some children of foreign IS fighters flash their middle fingers or pretend shoot the cameraman as if their hands were guns. In the Al-Hol camp, many boys are told they will grow up to be the next generation of militants. Girls under 10 years old wear veils for modesty. Some mothers have denounced IS now, saying they thought it was a good idea when they left their homes to join.
When you start practicing your religion, you have a lot of eyes on you. People start asking why you cover your face, why you do this. And then there's the offer, you can live in an Islamic State where no one asks you all this kind of thing.
More than 50,000 children of militants are now stuck in camps after the last IS stronghold in Syria fell in March. Most are with their mothers, the wives and other female relatives of the fighters of the so-called caliphate. Their fathers are almost all dead or in jail. Authorities say the camps have become increasingly dangerous, with numerous attacks on guards and women that do not still conform to the strict rules inside the camp, enforced by women who have set up their own IS-styled morality police. Thousands of families are from outside the region, and authorities here have repeatedly called for foreign countries to take back their citizens.
We are tightening security at Al-Hol camp, but this is a political problem for 50 countries, not ours alone.
Aid organizations say it is not too late to save the children of IS militants. But if nothing changes, they say, this humanitarian crisis could turn into a security disaster. Heather Murdoch, VOA News, Ain Issa and Al-Hol, Syria.
Lawyers for Australian Cardinal George Pell have filed an appeal with the country's highest court to have his convictions on sexually assaulting 2 teenage choir boys overturned. The 78-year-old Pell was found guilty last December of molesting the 2 boys in Melbourne's St. Patrick Cathedral in 1996 while serving as Archbishop of the Melbourne Diocese. He was sentenced in March to 6 years in prison. Pell is the highest-ranking Catholic official convicted in connection with the global child sexual abuse scandal that has embroiled the Catholic Church for 3 decades. In our health segment, Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu gives us a preview of an exclusive interview with Microsoft founder Bill Gates on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's 3rd annual report on progress toward United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and other topics.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has just released its 2019 Goalkeepers Report. It is an initiative launched in 2017 to track progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. These are a collection of 17 global goals set by the United Nations to address issues such as poverty and inequality by 2030. I sat down with Bill Gates, co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and asked him what did he find significant in this year's report.
Well, there's a lot of credit to go around. Nigeria engaged. The heroes are the women who went out, went house to house, even up in the Northwest, Northeast at some risk to their lives in doing that. So it's a wondrous effort. We're not done. We have to get to 0 cases, and we still have some vaccine-derived cases in Africa, and we still have some wild-type cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan. But here's another milestone where it's been 3 years since any wild polio cases have been seen in Africa. We worry that, it could spread back into Africa from Pakistan or Afghanistan. So we're working intensely there. But those health systems can be improved. And we learned a lot about primary health care in this effort, and that's why we're engaged, particularly with the states in the north, trying to help them get the vaccination rates up. They start below 30%, whereas some countries are, as they should be, over 90%. And so there are best practices. I work with Lalik and Dangote. We're committed to help those northern states get their primary health care into a strong position.
And speaking of Mr. Dangote, last year you were in Chad to also promote vaccination and raise awareness against polio. What did you make of that experience? What did you find in terms of people on the ground? How much do they understand the need to vaccinate the children and the threat of polio, really, even when there is no case? The fact that polio remains a latent threat?
Well, the number of deaths we could avoid, there's from northern Nigeria going east, that's the area of the world where still more than 10% of the children die. And that's partly because of malaria. It's partly because the primary health care systems need to be a lot better. Chad has less resources. There are parts of the country that actually do quite well on vaccination. So spreading those practices, I think, is valuable. Mr. Dangote came to Seattle this summer. We spent several days talking about how our foundations are working together to take on nutrition and other challenges.
That was Microsoft founder Bill Gates speaking with Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. Stay with Africa 54 for more of Lino Mudu's exclusive interview with Gates on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's 3rd annual report on progress toward United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and other topics. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.